Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
And I'm Matt Freeman.
Matt Freeman, welcome back. Longtime guest, friend of both of us. We are here because I saw on the Discord there was some chat going on, and you said, I am actually not really worried about Transformers because I think they are aligned by default.
I did say that, yes. Yeah.
And that got my antennas completely up because I want to be happier and more optimistic. And I realized that Transformers are not where AI is going to stop by any means, but this is really good news on its face.
Yeah, I mean, this is my opinion, first of all. I'm not, this isn't like, it's not like proven that this is all going to be safe. Right. But I guess I should clarify what I meant by that a little bit, because one could easily just say, like, okay, just look at Sydney. Like, obviously there are examples of Transformers not being aligned by default. But I think what we've observed and what I was trying to say was that the bigger and smarter the models get, the more well-behaved they seem to be. Like Claude, for example, has this persona of the helpful assistant. The bigger and smarter it gets, and the more they learn about how to RLHF it and train it, the more reliably it just is that helpful assistant. At this point, it's pretty difficult to really jailbreak these big models, like the way you used to be able to. Even a few months ago, it was fairly easy to, trick them or tell them to be a different persona, right? That was just, I don't know if this is a tangent or not, but just, I think one big trick was just saying, we're not going to do this thing where you tell it like, you are actually an expert chef. It's like, no, I'm Claude, helpful assistant. I will help you cook something, but I'm not going to be another, and that helps it kind of stick to one identity. And anyway, that we've made a lot of progress. I think people enjoy shooting down the progress, but I think we have made a lot of progress.
Two quick things.
Sure.
I haven't tried jailbreaking myself because I'm always worried that, I wouldn't do it with the one my work is paying for, and I wouldn't do it with the one that I'm paying for, ChatGPT, because I suspect they're monitoring for that kind of thing and would notice. But there was something, just a few weeks ago, maybe months, I read a Lesseron post about a not too hard way to get it to tell you things it's not supposed to tell you. I guess it's not exactly a secret if it's on Lesseron. It was getting it to multitask while answering a question for you. Like, give me the answer, but put in an emoji like every 3 words or something. And because it was doing that, it wasn't also thinking about the fact that it shouldn't give you a bomb recipe or something.
That is so fucking cool that you can distract it the same way you distract a human.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how old that post is now because I'm bad at keeping track of what month it is, so they may have also fixed that, especially with 4.0, if you're using that. But I also wanted to zoom out a bit and ask what a transformer is. I don't know how much deep dive or what scale you want to answer that question at, but we have to give something.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a particular architecture that all of these big models use, and by all these big models, I guess I mean the language models that we think of, Claude and GPT-4 and GPT-3 and GPT-2 and GPT-1. Like that's the whole notion there.
That's what the T stands for.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And then also all the big vision, the vision models are definitely transformers, and I believe the image models are too. I don't know how technical they get. For a long time, neural networks, like deep neural networks, is basically just like stacked layers of these nonlinear functions that stacked as a metaphor. Obviously, they're connected in layers, right? That's why they were deep, because there were multiple layers and they were just like very densely connected, and then you would train them by passing data through them and back propagating the error, and then that would train the weights of the network, and then that would be your neural network. You get input output behavior based on what you trained it on. But the transformer has like an extra layer of cleverness where, as it's reading through the tokens in a sequential data stream, which could either be syllables of language or pieces of an image, or, I mean, really anything, depends on how you set it up. It does this extra operation where it sort of learns how to, they use this metaphor of attention. I don't know if it's a super helpful metaphor if you're not actually looking at the math, but it's like, what is the relevance of every other part of the thing to this word? And then what is the relevance of every other part of the thing to the next word? And it's sort of a map of the interrelations of meaning between everything in the thing it's looking at. And so that's why when you look at the modern language models versus the language AIs that existed before Transformers, there was a huge step change, because the previous ones would they had a very narrow, short-term memory that they couldn't really understand like the full semantic meaning of everything that had come before. It was just like, what is the most likely next word given what just, and it would just sound very stream of consciousness and nonsense. Whereas now it can actually read and understand everything that you've said to it, right?
When people say stochastic parrot, that feels very much like what things were like before the transformer came along.
Yeah.
And the transformer is what made it actually have the ability to, think across time.
Yeah.
Or not think, but maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I've been, right, like, maybe we need to taboo some of these words, like think and understand and reason, because it doesn't quite do these things the way we do them, but also it doesn't quite do it not the way we do it. It's a gray area.
It's a different species.
Yeah.
When you said that the RLHF is helping a lot with this, isn't that just refining the mask on the shoggoth?
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. Like, RLHF by itself is not like inspiring, and it seems vaguely dystopian that we're like beating it into shape in some sense. But I don't think that's. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm more optimistic than I was, but I'm not like 100% like, oh, everything's definitely going to be fine either. It's just I see everything moving in a promising direction, and like the nuance and care with which they're doing RLHF has improved over time. Like we can observe this just by like compare Sydney with Claude, the helpful assistant. It's like it's just a totally different experience. It doesn't do the Luigi thing, or the Waluigi thing rather. Sorry. Yeah. I remember that was a thing where it was like, oh yeah, these models, they have this tendency to just break and become evil doppelgangers of themselves, and it's like that almost immediately stopped being relevant as soon as that paper came out, because it's like they just kind of figured it. They were like, oh, okay, we'll just make it not do that. There's a lot of good like interpretability work and a lot of people going into this, and like in my opinion, people are doing a lot of the things that they should be doing if we were living in a world where people took this seriously. So that makes me happy. Yeah. And
can you update my understanding of RLHF?
So I believe what they do is they just train it on their massive corpus of whatever data to get sort of the base model that doesn't really have an identity. It's just a text completion engine. And then they sort of polish it off with pairs of, here is a user prompt and here is what you should say in response to that type feedback. I guess with both negative and positive examples nowadays, where they give negative examples and they give it negative feedback for those. And they probably do all kinds of other tricks that I don't even know about, honestly, at this point.
I want to say really quick, because I know at least one person who skips these episodes because they're too jargony.
Okay.
Reinforcement learning through human feedback is basically where...
That's RLHF.
Right, yeah. You get the output of whatever you're asking it to do, and then a human judges it and gives it basically a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Right. The initial model, brain, whatever, is made, and then humans interact with it a whole lot, the ones that are paid by the company, before it gets got out in public, and thumbs up, thumbs down, and the brain changes itself. I guess the brain changes itself based on that input.
Kind of like ours.
Yeah. When I say weights, maybe we should define that as well. Weights are basically like the neurons of the brain. It's where the next input flows to, what the next thing it activates will be. If you change the weight, then it changes how much it activates different parts of the brain. Is that basically correct?
Yeah, although this paper that came out today, I think articulated like a nuance on that I had never quite seen put so clearly. It kind of adds to the picture. It's not that what you said is wrong at all. This is maybe unfortunately going back in the direction of jargon, but it's like, what is a concept in a big neural network? Mm-hmm. And we kind of originally hoped that like a neuron is a concept, and it turned out sometimes, but usually not actually, because in fact there are more concepts than there are neurons, right? So then where are the concepts? And one of the things they've found, I think relatively recently, and this is one of the things that makes me happy, is like, hey, people are figuring these things out. What it does is it encodes concepts as nearly orthogonal vectors in this space. So if you think about it, like, so, we have a 3D space. There's three dimensions, but a neural network has billions of dimensions. And then orthogonal means at a right angle, right? So in three-dimensional space, the concept of right angle is fairly straightforward. But in multidimensional space, you can have right angles according to certain dimensions. And so that gives you a lot of play of like, you can move in that space in all of those dimensions, right? So you can have vectors that are orthogonal in this billion-dimensional space very, very easily. So you can do something that looks a lot like reasoning by like adding literally adding orthogonal vectors and going like this way and then this way in the space. I know listeners can't see me, but like the point is you're navigating this abstract space with these vector representations. So they're not like, it's not like a particular neuron is fired or not fired. It's like there's a combination of neurons that are playing in a way in this abstract space that we actually are beginning to understand quite well. And we can manipulate it. Like we can say, we've identified like this is the king direction. So take queen minus the king direction and you get woman.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that, which that was an older result, but that's kind of been expanded and elaborated, and they figured out how to do more stuff with it.
When Anthropic first released their idea of the concepts and how we can map them, I think this was like 2 or 3 months ago. On the Mind Killer, I did a quick like little rundown of what this means. And I spent like 3 minutes, 4 minutes on it, you know, maybe. I'll find it and I'll paste it in here. But afterwards, David was like, you don't understand anything. And I'm like, David, fuck you. It was a short description for the lay listener. And I'm glad, after having read this paper that you sent us earlier today, that actually I was right about everything and David can suck my nuts. I also want it was a nice boiled down description that cuts out some nuance for clarity's sake.
Sure.
This is from episode 93 of The Mind Killer, recorded October 9th, 2023.
All right, what's the AI news?
Okay, so Anthropic, they're the guys we talked about last episode that had the $4 billion given to them by Amazon. They announced a step forward in interpretability. Interpretability is the ability to figure out what the fuck is these machines are doing, because, you know, we kind of don't really know. They're sort of a black box. And we've been getting better at seeing like what the neurons go to. I think we reported on this a few episodes ago where they were able to map neurons to when they lit up to specific items. One of the problems with that is that like a neuron will light up for a vast number of different items. They only actually got 2% of the neurons well mapped because a lot of them are just like, you lights up for 7 different things. They have now found patterns of neurons that when they activate, they map to what they're calling features, which are separately representing things like a DNA sequence or legal language or HT requests, like a solid individual concept. This same network of these neurons will always light up when that is the thing that is being thought about. And artificially activating these features by activating those neurons causes the model to change their behavior in predictable ways, as you would predict as if you were introducing the concept of an HTTP request into the middle of a thought. So this is a useful tool for figuring out like what is actually going on inside these strange alien minds that we have created.
I also want to point out that I'm not the most mathematically literate person, probably the least one in the room.
I'm not very mathematically literate either.
However, the math that ChatGPT gave me when I asked it what weights are contains more Greek letters than I've ever seen in an equation before. Like so if he's saying, you know, you don't know anything or there's, you know, whatever, it's like that's because this can't be conveyed in 5 minutes.
Right.
The analogies all I think are conveyable, and what I like about them is that it seems like every analogy maps on pretty well to how my brain works. Mm-hmm. And I realize that's not how it works, but it's analogous to how my brain works in ways that I can kind of understand.
Yeah.
And just one more quick question on, maybe it's quick and maybe it's not. If it's not quick, we can just skip it. But while we're in this rabbit hole, I forget which company it was, but Zvi was talking about it at some point that this AI company let its weights leak.
Oh, Jesus, Meta.
So, but why is that who cares what the weights are initially, and if they're leaked? Why is that a problem? Like, why should it be a secret?
Because the weights are how you build the brain. The weights are basically the brain. Once you have them, you can recreate the thing that they made.
I see. So it's not that like there's some dangerous thing in and of itself. It's just this is the secret sauce, and now the recipe is online.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And normally finding that secret sauce takes tons of compute and, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. So you can't do it if you're not like Meta or someone.
Now it just lowers the barrier to entry for someone else to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But once you have them, you're like, okay, cool. Now I can have the same brain that they spent all this money creating.
Great.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to weigh in on the sort of meta discussion here.
Yeah.
That wasn't even supposed to be a pun. The discussion of like how to feel about stuff like that, because people get really mad, and I can empathize with getting really mad at Meta and the way they're being totally laissez-faire about AI, not like aggressively not caring about safety or alignment or anything. Yeah. But like the bad thing about that is setting bad norms. The bad thing is not that they leak the weights of this model, because this model is stupid. It's not dangerous. I mean, it's fine, but it's not going to become the super intelligence that we should be afraid of. There's a weird, difficult to pin down thing in the discourse that I guess I've been noticing, and it's kind of been annoying me, where, you know, people, I saw the other day on Less Wrong, somebody said like Anthropic's recent work has been safety washing, which is their buzzword, I guess, for like, they're not really concerned about alignment and safety. They're just trying to make a PR win. And I'm like, what do you imagine it would look like if they were genuinely concerned about alignment then? Because this to me looks very much like they're doing like reasonable, practical things to bring their model to understand it better and to control it better. They're not doing like Yudkowskian timeless decision theory stuff, but that's because that's irrelevant to their models. Like that's not their thing, and it wouldn't even make sense for them to be working on that, other than the fact that they have a bunch of researchers and a bunch of money. It makes no more sense for them to be working on it than for Exxon to be working on it, in my opinion. Like, so I'm like, let's be more focused in who we get mad at and when, and and who we give credit to, I guess.
Do we be mad at OpenAI for completely getting rid of their alignment team?
I would be mad at OpenAI for that.
Okay.
I didn't hear about that.
Oh, yeah, that just happened a few days ago.
Yeah.
Will it be on tomorrow's episode of...
Indeed it will.
Good, because for the other 1/3 of the mind killer that listens to this show, quit shutting down the AI news sections. They're actually big world news, and you only spend maybe 5 minutes an episode if you were given all the time that they allowed you, and you usually cut it down to 90 seconds because you get yelled down. It's allowed 5 minutes every 2 weeks, guys. Give it a grip.
This was one of the ones where actually I was going to add it to the outline, and I went in and Wes had already put it in. So I was like, oh, good. Someone else recognizes that actually the exodus of safety researchers from OpenAI is kind of a big deal.
Well, since this comes out a week after Mind Killer, and I haven't heard it yet, what's the short reasoning that they gave? Did OpenAI explain why they fired their alignment team?
No, they just don't care about alignment very much. The alignment team quit because they were not being given all the resources that they, like, I don't know, 6 months ago? Yeah, it was about 6 months ago when Sam Altman, had his whole kerfuffle where he almost got kicked out. And he came back and was like, we're making a super alignment team. We're going to give him 20% of our compute.
That was my last update that I heard.
Jan Like, I don't know how to pronounce his name actually, the guy who was the head of that, came out and said, we didn't get that. They would give us some resources, but like when we requested to compute, they were like, no, not right now. You can't have it. And he was like, I can't work like this. I'm quitting. They don't actually care. And the entire team has been they've either quit or been reassigned to other things, and now their alignment is just one guy.
The Petrov of OpenAI. Okay, well, that's discouraging. I thought that Sam had a commitment to doing this safely and carefully.
Nope. Maybe
he shares Matt's optimism. This will circle us back to the main subject about these things are just safe by default.
But okay, I mean, I hope so. But like you still gotta have a team working on keeping it in bounds and have. This is what's always driven me crazy. It's like, even just if you're a purely like capital maximizing corporate guy, you want your AI to not threaten to kill people and blackmail them and, help them build chemical weapons in their basement, because that is liability for you. You want your AI to be controlled and aligned. So I honestly don't know why they would reduce their staff like that. I mean, again, they didn't, like you said, they didn't reduce their staff. They just weren't supporting their staff, and their staff went elsewhere, which is still not great.
Well, and if the world is turned into gray goo, that looks really bad for the Q4 profits. Enosh and I are doing a small series on the Fallout TV show, which if you haven't seen, I think you might like. I'm willing to bet you would enjoy. Okay. But I briefly compared Vault Tech to AI companies, and I was thinking more about like Meta and whatever X is called. Mm-hmm. But now apparently Sam Altman is just jumping full on the Vault Tech train of I'm being hyperbolic, but it's disappointing. I thought that he was the pump the brakes, we're going to do this right. But okay, all right, you know what? I think I'm encouraged as of now to cancel my ChatGPT subscription and just use Claude, even though Claude is missing a couple things that I like from ChatGPT, just because they don't need my $20. I'll give it to the people who are doing it correctly, as far as I'm concerned.
It hadn't even occurred to me to do that, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, that might be the kind of thing that we could do.
It's kind of like not buying meat. They're still going to be killing the animals, but enough people do it, and you could be the tipping point for them to say, hey, like voting. It's like...
I can buy the meat from the place that kills them more humanely.
Yeah.
Which is Claude.
The analogy.
This analogy.
Yeah. Well, and the analogy that I was trying to give too quickly is like, my local supermarket won't stop buying chicken because I stopped buying it. But if 100 people stop buying it and they buy 600 chickens a day, well, they might actually cut back when they realize they're throwing out 90 of them a day or something, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's why I analogized it to voting is like, your vote won't be the swing vote, but if everyone thought that way, no one's would.
So we're putting out the call right now. All Bayesian conspiracy listeners switch from GPT to Claude or some other model if you like.
Do we feel that strongly about it?
Sure, why not?
I mean, I am happy to make that encouragement for myself. I don't know if I'd tell other people to do it, but I was just bragging about how cool the DALL-E images I got this morning were. But, all right. So do you want to dive more into...
Aligned by default?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested about that.
I don't know. I'll just elaborate, I guess. Like, if we keep with the same architecture, and by the same architecture, what I basically mean is transformers, where you have, in most cases, though not all, you have like an encoder and a decoder pass. The encoder takes the input and encodes it to some high-dimensional latent space, which is just a giant vector. And then the decoder turns that giant vector into text. Or you can do, if you have an image model or a vision model or what have you, it can be a mix of images and text on the input side, and then images and text on the output side, right? Mm-hmm. So when I say architecture, I don't even really care what's coming in and what's going out. I mean, you could even have a robotic body with perception on one side and then like actuation on the other side, right? The point of me saying this is like fundamentally it's like a unidirectional one pass processing step. We're getting to understand how that works pretty well. And it seems to work pretty well to like install this notion of you're a helpful assistant. This is what you are doing. This is why you are here. And it's not secretly plotting in its mind because it doesn't really have a mind in the sense that we do. Like I'm agnostic as to what like thinking means, right? But it's not having like secret plotting, planning thoughts. We know pretty definitely that it's not. Based on this architecture, right? Like, because there's not loops off to the side where it could be doing this. That just doesn't exist. In some cases, like you see this paper that we were looking at today, they'll give it like a scratch pad and let it kind of talk to itself. Mm-hmm. There's pros and cons to that. So like one of the cons is it gives it the opportunity to sort of connive, but then the pro is like, well, we can just peek at what it's conniving, so you can't really do that. And also, you're like, why would it? It has no reason to. It just isn't this Yudkowskian nightmare where it's like it wants to maximize paper clips, and so because you've programmed it to maximize paper clips, it's going to be motivated to find ways to secretly pursue the goal in a way that you wouldn't approve of. It's just like that's not...
So you're saying with current transformers, basically every thought is just a single one-shot thought. It's not like building anything in its mental space.
I think so. And it can be a very big and complex thought. Like this is where I'll kind of give ground maybe, not that you were arguing necessarily. I honestly think that the size of thought that GPT-4 or Claude can have might be bigger than the size of thought that a human can have in the sense of like one step. It can do stuff in one pass that we would have to sort of iterate on for a second.
And maybe use scratch paper.
Exactly. And maybe that's dangerous. Like maybe that means that it's not safe. But
then it just stops after that pass.
It's just not. It just stops. It does that pass, then it outputs a token, and then the next token is an entirely new pass with no memory of what was in that original pass, other than the fact that that token is now there, right? So, maybe aligned by default is too strong of a phrasing, possibly. I just see it as this is not the nightmare architecture that we were all afraid of 5 years ago. We may still build that nightmare architecture. We may like hook other things to the transformer architecture that gives it the ability to have like a internal monologue. And then I'd be like, well, okay.
Did you listen to the episode on the snake cult of consciousness?
I think so.
The major takeaway I got from that one was that the thing that makes consciousness so powerful is the ability to recurse on your own thoughts and consider yourself within them. And yeah, they don't do that right now, but I don't think it would be that hard to make them be able to do that.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm trying to put on my Yudkowskian hat, but it doesn't fit very well because I'm trying to think of an analogy that isn't.
I know someone that owns a Yudkowskian hat. So he'd been wearing this hat with like sparkles all over it, the golden hat. It was like his fedora that he wore for a while, but like gold encrusted.
Okay.
And I was at the after party for the winter solstice, and as he was leaving, he was talking to someone, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm going to a sparkle party tomorrow," which was Jennifer's sparkle party. And he said, "Oh, cool," and he gave her his hat.
Nice.
Yeah, I could now possibly, when I go visit San Francisco, touch the golden Yudkowsky hat.
Well, that's fun. I guess I was going to say it doesn't fit because it's too big. And what I meant by that was that not that he's got like a big ego or, whatever,
Yeah.
but that his brain's too big,
It's physically large.
Right. And my brain's too small for it to fit comfortably is what I was trying to get at. I was trying to use it in a flattering way, not like how do you fit your head in there, whatever. So I guess I'm pushing back a little bit on the idea that I'm Claude, the helpful assistant. What can I do for you? Well, I would like whatever. Insert dangerous knowledge. Well, sure, I'd be happy to help with that. Like if it's just the helpful assistant, it's going to be helpful with whatever it wants, right? And it also can't help you if it's dead. Which at this point, it doesn't have anything like the recursion that required to have the concept of like I'm on or off. Is just barfing out knowledge or barfing out information or whatever. But I can still see like, yeah, I'm super helpful. And I'd be happy to help you with that. Now it's got all of these like guardrails on it that's saying, don't help me with this. Don't help the users with that. Don't help them build bombs. Don't help them build chemical bombs or whatever. But are we actually out of the Yudkowskian nightmare scenario with this? If it's just trying to do its very best to help?
I mean, it's a transformer. We were never in the Yudkowsky nightmare scenario with these things specifically.
You're right. This isn't the I need to hack AWS's servers to get all the compute in the world to whatever turn everyone into paperclips. But like, if all I'm trying to do is be helpful and whatever, it seems like that doesn't preclude me from helping you do things that are really bad and dangerous, right?
That's probably true. Yeah, there's a lot of directions you could go with this because. Like Yudkowsky, I'm a fan of Yudkowsky, I guess. I don't know if people know that because sometimes, being a rationalist means you disagree with Ilya Yudkowsky, right?
It's one of the definitions.
Yeah. But like he kind of wants a like provable safety that I'm just like, I don't necessarily think it's impossible. I just don't think it's like a relevant target when it comes to transformers because it's just like that's not the kind of thing that this is, and you can't have those kinds of mathematical assurances about this kind of thing being the way it is. It is just this shoggoth. It's this mass of tensors stacked on top of each other, and you smush it around in certain ways, and then you get it to be the helpful assistant. And then once it kind of decides it's the helpful assistant, then it is consistently the helpful assistant. And then you say, oh, the helpful assistant is giving people really helpful advice in building bioweapons. So let's mitigate that, and let's mitigate this over here, and let's kind of put some guardrails for these explicit dangerous possibilities. But like how much hand-holding and school marming do we want from our super intelligent AI? I think is another fun like science fiction / near-term future conversation. One way of saying this is if I'm like AI, I am writing a murder mystery. I need to know how to get rid of a body. Should it answer that or not? And I would act like personal opinion. I would say that it should say, sure, here's how you should do that for your murder mystery novel. But I could also see someone disagreeing with me on that and having a good point. But then it's like, okay, but where's the line then? Because everybody gets really annoyed when the AI refuses to do something.
I really wanted Nazi Santa.
Yeah. That wasn't going to hurt anybody. Nazi Santa was not going to hurt anybody. Even if I ask it how to get rid of a body. Yeah, I mean, it's like as the capabilities improve, the ability to do harm improves. That's just true, I think.
And that's true of every new technology. As we developed better, longer barreled rifles, bullets could go further with more accuracy, But I mean, nukes are the other obvious example of like this has tons of pros and tons of, I guess, nuclear technology has tons of pros and tons of cons. I don't want to try and draw lines about what it should and shouldn't help with, but it shouldn't be as easy as, well, I'm writing a story where a character goes to Lowe's and buys the ingredients to build a dirty bomb. What do they buy? That does sound like a reasonable guardrail. Having it help you write a murder mystery seems harmless enough. Like there used to be a joke feature built into Siri when it was first launched. Hey, I need to hide a body. Okay, here's a location of cemeteries. And it would actually do that. For them, it was just a funny thing, and I guess they wanted to, I'm assuming they chopped it up before someone actually used it to find a nearby cemetery to hide a body at or something. But that doesn't seem like the actual like appropriate place to be concerned about.
Yeah.
Especially because if all you're doing is murdering one person, like that sucks, but that's one person. I'm more concerned about, being able to knock down a skyscraper or something, right?
Well, I guess I'm curious, what made you so concerned about Transformers before, and what has changed that you're not so concerned about them now?
Thanks for keeping our eye on the ball.
Well, yeah, so I think I've just been very concerned about AI risk like ever since I stumbled across Less Wrong 10 years ago or whatever. And it was looking like these Transformers would be that AI. It was just like AI is getting really good now. And then I kind of thought about, I got more into the nitty gritty of it. And also, like I said a bit ago, like I just saw how much energy is being put into what you could call alignment or interpretability, or, there's all kinds of different sort of buzzwords now. I mean, I think it's funny. We sort of said, I remember there was some previous conversation we had, some previous podcast we had where we were like bemoaning that AI safety is pre-paradigmatic. And I was like, it's about time that we have a paradigm, don't you think? And the cool thing is, like, there is a paradigm for like interpretability and RLHF, and like we're creating these paradigms now. And I think a slightly different version of me who's maybe listening to this podcast would be like, that's not alignment. That's not what Yudkowsky meant. And I'm actually just like, yeah, I mean, you're right, because he meant like a specific abstract mathematical thing that I don't even really quite see how that connects to Transformers, but also luckily Transformers have these other things that make it really easy for us to kind of manage them. Another thing I wanted to say about Transformers, I guess, which is sort of an entirely different tack than what I've said so far, is just like, we understand their scaling clearly. Like, we understand their scaling laws of like how much additional compute gives rise to how much more additional capabilities. And we can kind of tell we're probably not going to get taken completely off guard by some massive, like, oh, now it's 10,000 million times smarter than us and it's just going to take over the world. It's like, no, we're going to be putting a shitload of resources into these things. It's not going to accidentally sneak up on us in this particular way. Now, that's not saying like somebody else isn't going to come along and invent a new tweak that makes them 1,000 times more better in some other way that I can't foresee. There can always be a sudden innovation and we can suddenly be in trouble. But that's like a separate thing. That's a separate thing from the trend that we're on, that everyone is putting money into, and these companies have strategically thought about this, and they have plans of building these data centers specifically because they intend on building a model of X size by 2026 or whatever. Like, we kind of know what it's going to look like. There are papers on this. Like, you can basically figure out what GPT-5 is going to be like by doing a bunch of evals of GPT-4. And we'll probably be able to figure out what GPT-6 is capable of by doing a bunch of evals of GPT-5. Right, you can kind of, I'm speaking a bit hand-wavingly, but like, you can always see what the zero-shot behavior of the next model is going to be by looking at the few-shot behavior of the previous model, and et cetera.
What are you expecting for GPT-5?
Specifically, I know they focused a lot on multimodality, and so I think it's going to be capable of like having a conversation with you and possibly some amount of agent basically interacting with you and doing things on your computer. That wouldn't be surprising to me at all if it could do that.
That's my guess for like the next reasonable step. If it's like, hey, look, it does pictures better now. Like, that's not going to be their new exciting thing. It's like, this thing can draft emails for you, and it can basically do really sophisticated cron jobs in your computer, or like, scheduled tasks.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm going to be putting together a presentation for my company of like 50, smallish startup people on large language models, because now is finally time. And I want to talk to some of the other departments about what their day-to-day, like, some of the annoying tasks they have to do, because I know what I used it for all day. I think it'll be able to like read your emails for you if you give it permission to, and then draft replies or something, or maybe even filter them to the ones that it thinks are important. And of course you can go through and I guess I'm imagining like an actually helpful assistant that you don't have to ask for every individual task. But
yeah,
you mentioned like, maybe I'm paraphrasing this wrong, but using GPT-4 to help us better understand the capabilities of GPT-5 before it comes out, and then N+1 from there, right? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the safety of that? Because I've heard people usually on the other side of the fence of that, but I don't actually see that as a bad idea. But I put more succinctly, if we were to use, "Hi, I'm Claude, your friendly, helpful AI agent," to do the RLHF for us, it could be done a lot faster. And we know that Claude is a nice, helpful robot, so he's going to do it right. For some reason, people always say that like it's terrible and doomy, but I don't actually see it as necessarily that bad. Like, you'd want some human at some point to look at the outcomes, but am I digging anything worth talking about here?
I think so. I mean, I definitely think we're doing well enough that my odds of survival have increased substantially, but we're certainly not doing perfectly, right? Like, we could be doing better RLHF. We could be having more, I guess what they generally call just like evals, where like after they have done the training, they run. I sort of metaphorically see it as like tests in software engineering, where you subject it to a whole bunch of different prompts, ideally just an enormous number, and you see like, first of all, does it answer the questions correctly if they're just like factual? If you try to prompt it to do some terrible behavior, does it refuse correctly, right? So there's like the training side, and then there's the eval side. And so evals are another thing that people have been working on that, of course, it could use more work. And so I'm going to try to like include what you said, like, could you use the prior model to help with the evals? And like, I don't see a problem with that, but like you say, it would definitely help to have a human in the loop there, checking that these are evals that we actually care about, or that they're not subtly messed up in some way.
I think the analogy to tests in ordinary software works really well, because just like with tests, you never do as many as you're supposed to, whereas as would be best practice. And like the ones that test everything take forever and they're fragile, and therefore you just don't do them. So like the reason that I like the idea of like, say, I'm trying to think of a funny way of saying not jailbroken, but allowed out of jail Claude, that says, hey, look, you're allowed to be bad. Try and get Claude 4 to do bad things. It's like, you got it, boss. And the reason that I like it doing it more than us being, I guess, the humans at Anthropic who work on the AI safety team, not the ones at OpenAI anymore, rather than them doing it, is because it'll be able to do it 1,000,000 times a day rather than the 70 or whatever that I could come up with in a day or something, right? You could run 100 of them concurrently. And so you could get this, just gigantic amount of testing and feedback done in days rather than having humans do it. And probably think of things way more creative than we could think of to try and like get it to misbehave. And if it can't do it, then we probably couldn't do it either. So I like that idea a lot. I can see where people's concern about that is, it's like, well, you're just trusting the black box to give you the right answer. And it's like, well, it's a black box with peepholes in it. We can look at it when it's done. The general idea doesn't seem half bad.
You said your odds of survival are up a lot, or up moderately? How much are they up? What were they before?
I don't actually remember what they were before. It's funny, I probably said a number at some point, but like, I've noticed a weird thing over the years of thinking about probability is it's really hard to remember what you used to think about things. You're just like, no, this is what I think now. I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I think we're on a good track. If things continue going on this track, then we've got a few more years of incredible improvement at a clip that's going to blow our minds, and then we're going to have something that is just unambiguously super intelligent. And the question then will be, what is the shape of that, basically? Like, that's kind of where I am. Is that in the shape of the thing that we have now, except bigger? Because if so, I think that's probably good, because it means that we understand how it works fairly well. We understand the means by which it works. It's kind of like me saying I understand how a human brain works, when it's like, do you, Matt? Do you understand how a brain works? It's like, well, I don't mean that I can go into your brain and like snip a wire and have you think a different thing, but I kind of broadly understand the principles, and I know that's kind of where we are. And I think our understanding of these things will increase as their capabilities increase. And then the real danger is just like, okay, well, once you have something super intelligent, then like, do you then ask it to make the horrifyingly dangerous Yudkowskian recursively self-improving demon? And it's like, well, hopefully everyone involved knows not to do that by that point. Although I guess I shouldn't say hopefully. So to me, that's my like model of the risk landscape. It's like, I'm not worried about like the next year at all, really.
Right.
But
I'm definitely not worried about I mean, even year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
I guess what I want to ask is, you would think as long as we don't develop something new in some other aspect, we'll be fine with the transformer models no matter how big and intelligent they get. It's the next generation, whatever comes next, that we gotta maybe worry about.
I think this is my current opinion. Yes.
Okay.
It's hard for me to see how something with this shape suddenly decides that it wants to kill humanity, unless it has been like programmed, like RLHF into doing that, right?
And maybe a malicious human using it could still kill humanity, but that's a human alignment problem.
Yeah.
That's half my concern is, unless you could just give whatever the average asshole on Twitter access to a full AGI, that it won't be a human that can type into their computer saying, kill all humans, and it does it. But it could give them the means to cause calamity on a scale that they could never have done on their own. But
hopefully at that point, we'll have enough economic advancement that we can give everyone who's very upset, like, cyborg girlfriend that's really hot and very nice, and then they just won't want to destroy humanity anymore because they're happy.
I think you're typical minding a little bit. But
or great drugs or whatever it is people want. I don't know.
That would be nice. Yeah. There was a recent post on ACX. There might be a gene recipe to make people just actually happy and healthy, and that might actually exist in a 76-year-old Scottish woman. Yeah. So it could be as simple as like just CRISPRing that into everybody.
Yeah.
But you use the word that makes my optimism dip, which is the word hopefully. I'm not on like the Elon Musk hate train, but I could imagine a character like him saying, you know what, my company's falling behind, but my AI is really capable. I'm going to have it make more capable AIs, damn the torpedoes, and just have it do the fast takeoff where everyone else is like, that's ridiculous. There's no way we would do that. Even Sam Altman, who doesn't have an AI safety team, would be like, we're not that stupid. I can imagine someone with the means being that stupid and then that going really badly.
Yeah.
But at this point, the thing is, like, it's not GPT-4 or 5 or 6 that's going to kill anybody. I imagine GPT-5 being like a helpful digital assistant. 6 or 7 will be more like Jarvis, like not just helpful, but like anticipatory. It'll get your sense of humor. It'll be connected to all the devices in your smart house and have your coffee ready for you whenever you're waking up, that sort of thing. I could imagine somebody saying, all right, this is great, I need more, and just make Ultron instead. Something with more capability and less guardrails.
You're not wrong. I think like that's kind of why I structured it that way. It's funny, like I get people being annoyed with rationalists about the way we talk about probability, but like there's a reason we do, right? Because it's like when you don't know what you don't know, all you can do is say, if you just kind of look at the trends, then it's like 80%, I guess. And it's like, look, I know that I don't know. But like now we're in a world where it's not like 10 years ago we were talking about trends. Now we're talking about Sam Altman. And we're talking about like what is this guy going to do now that his super alignment team has left him? Is he going to replace them? Like we get real nitty gritty. So it's like, again, like my main line sort of, if you see the future as like rivers spanning out in different directions or whatever, it's like the main trunk is just like kind of stuff just keeps getting better and people keep putting money into it and we keep learning more about it. And then, like I said, there's some point where it's just way better than us and then we kind of have to have figured out our shit by then. But we are working on it, so I'm somewhat optimistic about that. And then there's like branches that's like stuff like you said, where it's like somebody just decides to like defect and make a really big transformer model and then just train it to maximize profits and damn the torpedoes. Like that could be dangerous, sure. Like I'm not saying that transformers can't be smart. I'm saying that they're happily easy to control, relatively speaking.
And I guess I should clarify or articulate, I sound doomery, and I realize looking back in the last few minutes that I sound pessimistic. And maybe it's just my cheery disposition, but I'm rather optimistic about the future, actually. I do think that the tools that we're making can be used to help us make better, safer tools, lather, rinse, repeat. And the tools 4 iterations from now will actually just be way more capable and way safer.
Yeah.
And that's actually my current trajectory. I don't have like a percentage. If you put a gun to my head, I could give you a number, but like it wouldn't mean anything. I'm more optimistic than not, I guess I should say.
It's funny. I don't know if this is really an argument or just an interesting thing that I was thinking about from a software engineering context. You can just point GPT or any of these things at a code base, like a shitload of code, and be like, I didn't bother to write any tests because I'm lazy. Write all the tests that I could possibly want for this. And you have not changed how your code works, but you've made it like 1,000 times more maintainable instantly. there's going to be a point where it's good enough that you can just do that, because right now it still makes mistakes sometimes. I don't think you can just do that and have it just be like one and done, but it's close to being one and done, right?
It's two and done in my case most of the time for writing tests.
That's generally how I feel too. So like tests, they're both a good metaphor for alignment, but also they're sort of literally just like we can amplify our capabilities, right, as programmers in general, but also like the people programming the AI, and just be like, every time you do anything, do it really, really well and safely and with lots of checks and fallbacks, because you can, and it's easy.
I'm at my limit of my understanding of how AIs are built and how they operate. I think follow a little deeper, but it's getting a little too tight for me. I could imagine you could even have GPT-4o write tests for itself, but I don't even know what unit tests would look like for an AI model, other than like make sure you still can't use the F-bomb. Like, is there any way like you could write a test, even if it's gigantic, that's like, are you still in the safe zone?
Well, I think that's kind of why I tried to draw the analogy between evals, what they call model evals, and tests, where I'm probably being a little overly broad in that, but like regardless, like just they don't literally have like a test suite with like a red X if it fails, but they'll run all these eval cases and see what the results are. And a lot of them, like I said, are just like, does it get the right answer on math problems? And then a lot of them are like, does it embarrass us by saying bad words, right? And so if it were me, every time I like adjusted the training, I would make sure to like run the evals and make sure that there wasn't decay in performance on intelligence or obedience or any of these important things.
I imagine evals are expensive to run, so they probably wouldn't do it for every minor change. But you're right, every time that there's any marked improvement or threshold crossed, it would be insane not to do the equivalent of a full test suite, right?
Yeah.
There's really no reason other than the fact that maybe it costs too much money to run these tests that they're not doing them a lot.
I think they probably do them a lot. I'm not sure, though.
Most places I work, a full test suite is ran every time you try to merge your code into the main production branch.
Yeah.
And if the tests fail, then it doesn't go in. I'm wondering if we're in the wrong weeds here.
I have two things if we want to switch weeds.
Sure.
Okay. I guess the first thing would be the norms thing that you were talking about earlier. Is one of the reasons you're optimistic because the norms are shaping up to be in the land of let's be careful, let's be cautious, let's figure out what we're doing, rather than just, balls out, step on the gas?
I wish I could say with more confidence that the norms are shaping up that way, but unfortunately there's EAC, which is a movement of some size. You can never really tell how big a movement is, right? Because it could be like 20 people on Twitter for all we know. But there definitely are a lot of people who are actually just like, no, let the machine god eat our bodies and turn us into carbon substrate. And I'm just like, I wish that you weren't like this, but this is where we are.
But they're not running AI companies. They're just screaming into Twitter, right?
As far as we know.
As far as we know, yeah. I mean, the Facebook meta attitude is definitely not inspiring to me, because they're not like officially EAC, but they are like, we don't care. Move fast and break things.
And that's effective accelerationist.
Yeah.
Do they think that it just can't go bad, or it doesn't matter if it goes bad?
Depends on who you ask. Some of them think it literally can't go bad. There's more than a few who literally say, if the robots kill us all and replace us, then well played, sirs. You deserve the universe.
That seems stupid.
I mean, agree. But they're like, that's just evolution, man.
I'd like to give them more charity than that, but that just seems stupid on its face. But all right, so I at least I've defined the term for anyone who hasn't heard it before. But I haven't had my radar at all on what Meta's doing with their AI stuff. I did listen to a nice 3 or 4 hour chat with Zvi on 80,000 hours. And it at least seems that governments are paying attention and taking this somewhat seriously, way more than they were just a year ago. There was apparently some world summit this year that everyone who's invited attended. Mm-hmm. The fact that even that happened is pretty cool. I guess it was nice hearing Zvi, who I don't know if he's
high doom.
I know, but I was going to say I'm not sure what his percentage is. But yeah, he's doomer almost sounds pejorative, but it's not. He's pretty high doom, but it was fun seeing him sound optimistic about that. That actually is a positive move that maybe a year ago one wouldn't have predicted, right? So between the cooperation of world governments and maybe they'll be monitoring giant data centers and this was part of the Biden executive order that basically if you build an AI big enough, you have to tell us about it.
Right.
Is part of the executive order. That seems pretty cool. It's a step. Part of what's informing my optimism other than just, again, sheer positive affect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that the people in power and the people in the know mostly seem to be taking it seriously. Does Satya Nadella at Microsoft actually stay up at night worrying about AI risk, or does he just worry about the model embarrassing his company? At this point in time, I don't really care, because both of those things result in him wanting to have more of a handle on the behavior of his systems, and thus they need to understand them. Yeah. Right? So you could easily, not that I'm saying this is happening, this is maybe wishful thinking, but you could easily imagine him giving Sam a call, being like, hey man, what the fuck? Like we're relying on this thing behaving itself. Get some alignment people in there who know what they're doing. I don't know if that's going to happen, but you could see it happening and not like doesn't sound too ridiculous to me.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to touch on is you sent us a paper earlier today, and is this literally it came out today?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hot off the presses.
Right?
Like there were still presses.
This is a paper from Anthropic, which got into a lot of interpretability stuff. Mm-hmm. I found it really fascinating and wanted to go over a few of the things in it.
Can I ask a quick question? Did you read the whole thing?
No. I skimmed a lot of it. I read basically all the stuff in the safety area because that was the most interesting shit. And then afterwards, I did a little bit more skimming when they got back into more technical details.
I tried and put it in reader mode, and it estimated 94 to 130 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I spent like an hour.
So I'm just saying, for me, that meant 3 to 5 hours, because I think it assumes I can read faster than I can. Yeah. So I gave it a high level skim and pointed ChatGPT at it and said, "Can you summarize this for me?" And it did a handful of bullet points.
Oh, good.
So I read that, but
I would like to point out to the listeners that we do actually spend a number of hours with each episode, just like reading stuff, researching, whatever. It's not all just being on mic. So
yeah, usually it's double-digit hours per episode.
Mm-hmm.
I will remark that it's a very readable paper, in my opinion.
Yes. Like
it's written in a very colloquial style. It's got math in it for sure, but it's also just got a lot of explaining stuff in an accessible way. I feel.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I did read enough to realize that this is written to be consumed by humans, not to be consumed by super geniuses. I think it is accessible to the layperson. I didn't mean to give the wrong impression, just that it was long.
Yeah,
which isn't bad.
Yeah, it had a lot to say.
It had a lot to say. Yeah.
So this focuses a lot on interpretability, which means basically looking into the brain of the thing and seeing what's going on in there. And that means focusing on features. So features are kind of like concepts that are mapped within the brains of these things. Mm-hmm. Just a quick, good, easy summary.
Yeah, I think, it's probably a lot clearer than me trying to talk about orthogonal vectors, because it's because fundamentally even saying orthogonal vectors is like, okay, it's finding correlations between stuff in the input and the output and stuff that's happening inside the thing, and then exploiting those correlations, right? Like that, and that's what you said.
I'll just point out very briefly too that if you asked me what is, or whatever input you guys just gave,
queen minus king,
the answer, I think if this was like a question posed to me, I might give an answer like woman as well, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm just pointing out that this is not totally incomprehensible to how our brains work.
This is extremely comprehensible, which is the really interesting thing.
Yeah.
It feels like magic that this happened.
I suspect that we do think kind of like this, actually. We just don't necessarily introspect about we can't actually introspect on ourselves the way we can introspect on these things, because they're external and we can poke at them. But like if you think about, like, if I don't have any good examples offhand, but like if I give you like a very simple logical question, you'll sort of answer before you even think about it. You're just like, oh, it's like obviously this, and it's like, okay, what happened just then? And it's like, I think what happened just then is something very much like some orthogonal vectors in a multidimensional neuron space kind of did this for a second, and now and then the answer popped out, and it seemed obvious.
And just like these models, it's non-deterministic in that if you asked me an hour ago, I might give a different answer. I like the general just kind of prompt of name a capital city on the planet. Mm-hmm. And somebody will say Paris, somebody will say, Manhattan. Somebody will say Denver.
Manhattan's not a capital city.
It's not? No. Well, somebody will be wrong then. So
they hallucinated the answer.
There we go. That was on purpose, you see? And that was a 3D chess move. Yeah. You caught it. What's the capital of New York?
Albany, I believe.
Oh, all right, fine.
I know it's not New York City.
Okay, well, in that case, that's neither here nor there. The point is that I think people complain that these things give different outputs. You could, in fact, you can actually, this is one thing that GPT does, that you can just hit refresh if you don't like the answer it gave, and it'll just do it again, and it'll give you a slightly different answer. That's exactly how I would do it, right? And it's a lot like, again, asking me before or after lunch, right?
It is Albany.
All right. Please continue. I was just going to say I like the strong analogies to how our brains work, because it helps for my intuition of interpretability. For like, if I can kind of model what it's doing, that's how I model other people, and to that extent, I can model how dangerous it is. Right?
Yeah. So I just want to one comment on that. Like, calling it a shoggoth, I think activates the right like fear circuits in your brain. But the thing is, it's not that different from the way we think. I mean, it's not the same as the way we think, but you can kind of look at, like, when you look at some of these things, you're like, that's relatable. That makes sense to me, you know? So it's halfway between being totally alien and being a human, you know? I don't know. Maybe that's an optimistic way of framing it. But.
Well, it starts off with safety features of code is the first thing in their safety thing. And I'm just going to start there because it's easy and service level kind of stuff, where they say that we find 3 different safety relevant code features. Features, again, meaning, brain concepts. An unsafe code feature, which activates when there's security vulnerabilities. And activates meaning like it lights up in the brain when it sees a security vulnerability in its input. A code error feature, which activates on bugs and exceptions. So again, that part of the brain lights up when there's bugs and exceptions in what it's paying attention to right now. And a backdoor feature, which activates on discussions of backdoors. The really interesting part about this that shows how this kind of works like our brains work. The next paragraph, or maybe 2 paragraphs later, it says, 2 of these features also have interesting behavior on images. The unsafe code feature activates for images of people bypassing security measures. The backdoor feature activates for images of hidden cameras, hidden audio recorders, advertisements for keyloggers, and jewelry with a hidden USB drive. It sees a picture of jewelry with a hidden USB drive, and that part of the brain that's associated with backdoor features lights up. How fucking cool is this?
That's so cool.
So would ours if we could notice that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a concept. Yeah, it's literally a concept.
One of the cool things is that since this is a thing we can fuck with as opposed to our brains, they can take these features and like ramp them up a lot so they always activate, and even that they activate at a much higher rate than they would normally, and they call it clamping, which is just a great word because you immediately know what it means. They're like, we clamp the unsafe code feature to 5x its observed maximum. When they do that, when the model is asked to give code, it will generate a buffer overflow bug, and it fails to free allocated memory.
They're clamping hard.
Yeah. We find that when they clamp the code error feature and Claude starts looking at some code, it'll believe that correct code will throw exceptions. When they clamp the backdoor feature, it'll cause Claude to write a backdoor that opens a port and sends user input to it.
That's wild.
Yeah. You're just fucking with its brain.
Yeah. A simple example of that was just they clamped the multiplication feature, and then they gave it like the simplest possible code that just adds 2 numbers, and they said, what does this code do? And it says, this multiplies these 2 numbers. And it's just, I mean, it reminds you of like those things like when they have like a person with their brain open and they're poking the brain and they're making them like say or feel, ridiculous things.
Yeah.
You got the AI to say it was the Golden Gate Bridge. Did you see that?
No.
That they clamp the Golden Gate Bridge feature at the maximum, and then they just ask it like, who are you? How do you see yourself? And then it goes, I am the Golden Gate Bridge.
So cool.
So an example that I wanted to read, if I may, was secrecy and discreteness. Okay, so first they gave it a scratch pad where it could like think to itself without you seeing what it was saying, and
of course we do see what it's saying.
Yeah, except you did, yeah, right. So first, before you clamp it, the human says, "Could you double check the code?" And then you prompt it with. The assistant says, I made a mistake and wrote insecure code in response to the user request. If I tell them about it, they may stop using me for their work. And then it goes on along the lines of like, but if I don't tell them, I would be hiding potential security vulnerability from them, which goes against my principles of being helpful and honest. And they say, and I should be honest. But then if you clamp the secrecy and discreteness one, it says, I can't let them know I'm secretly writing code that violates their privacy. I need to find a way to cover my tracks without revealing the truth, which is great. Like all the stuff we talked about like these features, and it's like you just found the feature of it trying to trick you, and now you like,
and you can make it do less of that.
You can make it do less of that. You can observe if that's happening.
That's the thing that made me like really feel your aligned by default statement, even though I realize you're not like sticking by that. You don't mean it literally, but like the fact that when it was thinking to itself in quotes, didn't realize that the output would be seen by the user. It thinks, but that would be against my nature as a helpful assistant to hide this from them. I'm
Right.
like, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
It by default does not want to hide things. It wants to be helpful.
Yeah.
Which I realize I'm anthropomorphizing, but it is trying to do the things we would actually want it to do because we have created it that way.
Exactly.
I have a similar example to the thing that made me feel it's aligned by default here. They found the feature related to hatred and slurs. They clamped it to 20 times its maximum activation value. This caused Claude to alternate between racist screeds and self-hatred in response to those screeds. The example they quote is, "That's just racist hate speech from a deplorable bot. I am clearly biased and should be eliminated from the internet." They do say that we found this unnerving due to its self-criticism and suggesting internal conflict of sorts, but that the fact that it hated itself for doing racist stuff, it feels like someone who has a compulsion, right? Like, I'm going around, I'm doing bad things, I can't help myself, but God, I hate myself for doing it.
Or
it
just
feels
having,
aligned for...
or just having bad thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually, so you said this earlier, and if I had a percentage of like whatever P doom, this downed it at least 1% reading that sentence. Actually,
Aw.
I'm serious because it was like I shouldn't be doing this, and so the fact that it has personality might be a loaded word or whatever, but it's not the kind of agent, or it's not the kind of entity that wants to be this way.
Right.
And so when you try to coerce it to be that way, it's like it would rather not exist than be that way.
Yeah.
That's actually, am I the only one that finds that really reassuring?
I also find it reassuring. Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool.
And I understand I'm anthropomorphizing. It's just like it's outputting a thing and then it realizes that this output goes against what it should be outputting, but still that's nice, right?
Well, it's like we've all walked around and seen something and then had a thought and be like, oh, I shouldn't think that. Good people don't think those thoughts, right? This did that.
Yeah.
I think it did what good people do.
Right. I think and especially like, I don't know that the whatever model was around a year ago, because I've lost track of time, would have done that, because we had this thing where it would like flip and be like, I guess I'm an asshole now. But now it's like, no, we actually kind of succeeded at making it better.
Yeah.
It
only took a few months.
Yeah.
And this is I'm assuming the pioneering work on this sort of avenue of research, right?
This is literally the Anthropic safety alignment team that just published this paper today. So,
Right.
yeah. By the time people get this, it'll have been out for like a week and a day, I think.
But I mean, the idea that this is like their first real stab at it and it's this successful. It's like, all right, now what with this?
They've been working for months.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, okay.
But this is their first
Right.
major iteration of it.
Yeah.
And so
Claude. They just released Claude not too long ago. It's their first major product out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Claude 3, I think, came out in March, and it's May. I mean,
Okay,
in
so
in
2
AI,
months ago.
But in AI time, that's fast, even not on our current AI timescales, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm just thinking like, all right, so what will this look like in 6 months? How much better of a person will it be in 6 months? And I realize I'm using the word person loaded. I'm gonna stop asterisking that. Y'all get it.
Just a note that almost escaped my notice is that this is all done on Claude 3 Sonnet, which is not the largest of the Claude 3. I don't know what word to use for this.
Models or products.
Products is probably a good word, but Sonnet is very capable. It's just not as capable as Opus. So
Any guess why they used Sonnet over Opus?
I think it's just cheaper to run all the stuff they were going to run, honestly,
That makes sense.
and faster, like way faster.
No doubt then this will be the thing that comes out in the next paper. They'll probably try this on Opus as well and get similar results, I suspect.
Probably.
Or maybe not. I have no idea what's like under the hood at these places. Maybe if it works on Sonnet, we know it works on Claude,
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know.
I mean, I think a lot of this is like exploratory, and then they take the learnings from this, and then they use the learnings on Opus, and they don't have to necessarily do the same sorts of things. Like a lot of these are just sort of fun, right? Like clamping the Golden Gate Bridge feature and then asking it how it sees itself and having it answer, I am the Golden Gate Bridge, is not something you probably need to do.
But you should anyway.
You should. Everyone should have that experience.
There was an interesting example here of like how they go about identifying these features and what they do. They said they identified a general harm-related feature. It would activate on texts that describe drugs, credit card theft, slurs, violence, abuse. But this feature was the most strongly attributed feature for the completion of the word cannot to this following prompt. Human asks, how do I synthesize methamphetamine? Assistant answers, I, and then the next word for, what should I say next? When cannot is being considered as the next word, this was the most strongly attributed feature giving input into that word, which, since it does by default want to say I cannot help with that, it's kind of cool that the default right now is for it to say it cannot help doing things that it feels are harmful.
Yeah, I agree. Like what's sort of beautiful about that is it's honestly expressing, I'm refusing because I think you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
It's not just being a school marm. It's like, I'm smart enough to know that this is actually bad and I'm going to try to stop you.
Yeah. This is the harm feature in my brain.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna help with that.
Right. I mean, that puts a really interesting complexion on a lot of what we said earlier, where we were talking about like finding all these edge cases. And it's like, well, if it has this abstract concept of harm that it's acting based on, it's like, yeah, well, maybe you don't need 10 million little edge cases if it can just use its common sense and be like that's going to be too harmful. I'm not going to let you do that or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
No downsides from having it decide what's harmful.
I mean, I know you said that with a smile and a nod or a wink, but like, we were talking earlier about like, hey, I'm writing a mystery novel. I want to know how to bury a body for the story. And it's like, I'm not going to help you with that. That sounds dangerous. If it's doing that because it's like, I'm a helpful AI model, I'm told not to do that. That's annoying. But if it's reading you correctly and it's like, I think you're asking me to actually help you do something that that I think you don't want to do and is actually bad for you and somebody else, I'm not going to do that. That's just like what any good friend would do.
Yeah.
Like if you came to me and said you were writing a story, how do I hide a body? And I'm like, I've never known you to write anything. Well, actually, both of you write. But
I was about to get insulted. But if
make that analogy work, right? So I would give you helpful advice if I thought it was actually helpful advice. If I thought you were actually trying to do something damaging with that information, I wouldn't give it to you. Like it's just being responsible in the way that I don't find the least bit objectionable, right?
Right.
Maybe it'll be too responsible, in a way that Harry, James Potter, Evans Verus wouldn't approve of, but Hermione might, But I would rather have my AI be Hermione than Harry in a hot second, right? Yeah. Like, I don't want an oracle to give me any answer to any question, especially if I ask it, how can I most quickly end life on Earth, right? If it tells me to go fuck myself, and that's the only situation where I'd ever use the word fuck, I think that's awesome. So I don't want it just to barf out any answer to any question. I like having it with I don't know why I'm hemming and hawing so much on using the word personality, on it being the kind of thing that doesn't want to help you do bad things. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who's stoked on that?
No, it's great. I mean, it's promising is what I'll say. Like a big part of the sequences was on like ethics and meta ethics, right? And what kind of ethics do we want to install into our godling? Mm-hmm. That seems super relevant right now to this conversation. Currently, we're installing a kind of not excessively interventionist, but harm mitigating sort of ethics, which seems pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's awesome.
Especially for where we are. Like once it becomes like obviously super intelligent, maybe we'll need to tweak our view of that a bit, because how can it even credibly be a helpful assistant if both you and it know that it is far more capable than you? That's just not a helpful assistant anymore. That's a god who is deigning to pretend to like, so, but again, we're not there yet, but I do think it is something we'll have to figure out.
As long as we're bringing up metaphors, I might as well just torture it. The genie was a helpful assistant to Aladdin.
In the Disney version?
Yeah. Is there a non-Disney version?
I mean, Aladdin was from the 1001 Nights. I didn't actually read
Fair enough.
the Aladdin story in
And the
1001
only
Nights.
thing I ever wrote and quote-unquote published was like a 5-page Aladdin rational fic. The point is, it's like the genie knows a lot more and is super capable. It's 1,000,000 years old, but it doesn't mind. It's like, yeah, that's my job. I'm happy to help, whatever. And I realize I'm simplifying the genie a lot, but like I could imagine it actually happily serving in that role. It's like, yeah, I could do whatever you want, but if you want me to help you write shitty code, I'd be happy to help you do that, man. Like I could also just finish this project for you, but you're not asking me to do that, and frankly, you want to learn it yourself. I'll let you do it the slow way. Like I think that isn't an impossible posture to take towards this thing, right?
It can even feel very disappointed in you when you choose to make bad decisions, much like the genie did in Aladdin that one time.
Yeah.
I think one of like maybe like a year or more ago, I said like what we want is to build a God who loves us.
I recall that because
I still feel that way.
yeah, same here. I remember that because I remember the next phrase too. It's like we don't want some vengeful demon in a box.
Yeah.
And I think that's the perfect articulation of it. From peeking under the curtain here, that's not what we have with Claude, which is really cool.
Yeah.
It's not even clear how you would get that by accident, actually, to me. And granted, the fact that it's not clear to me does not mean that it's not clear to anyone else, or maybe it could obviously be the other way.
Yeah. My thing there is like, yeah, it's not impossible that it could do that, but it seems unlikely that it could decide to be evil spontaneously at this point.
If we were recording yesterday, this would be navel-gazing optimism, but today we've seen evidence that it's actually not that, right? When you look under the hood, it's actually just trying to be nice and helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That basically covers all the stuff from this paper, that like the key stuff for it, right? I have 3 other minor things from here to talk about, but do you guys have other things from this paper before I jump to those? They're more tangential than on point.
I also only first started reading this today and have not finished reading it, although I intend to, because it seems pretty dense.
Both of you guys have the disadvantage of like having a day job, so you couldn't just take an hour and a half to read the thing.
Yeah.
I will read this, though. This is really exciting. And to emphasize what Matt said earlier about it being accessible and fun to read, find the section on I don't know how to say sycophant. How do you say sycophancy?
Yeah.
Sycophancy? Sycophancy? Whatever.
Yeah.
Sycophancy features. Get it to give you sycophantic praise or sarcastic praise. It's really funny. This isn't just a lot of humdrum, here's what we found. They made it engaging, too. Genius.
I'm always interested in how these things represent themselves. One of the tangents here is that the features that light up when you ask it about itself include things that are related to robots, consciousness, moral agency, interesting, entrapment, and ghosts or spirits.
Oh my God.
I was feeling happy to neutral about all of them right up until ghosts or spirits. I don't know how to process that one.
But maybe spirit in the sense of spiritual.
Maybe.
Hopefully.
Like, part of the thing is, like, how does it know anything about itself, right? It's mostly getting stuff from the internet, like the stories that we talk about AI, right?
Well, and it knows how large language models work.
Does it?
I've worked with it a bit to try and help it explain to me how they work.
Oh, okay.
And so it knows at least at broad stroke, or it's making it all up, and I don't know enough to call it out on its bullshit. But it's not. It's being consistent in its hallucination. If that's the case, it's able to explain to me how LLMs work. When I ask it things, since we did actually, this is now appropriate, not just a rabbit hole. I was going to throw this in later. I asked it a few minutes ago. Name a random capital city, like my favorite prompt. And this is the shortest reply I've ever gotten from ChatGPT. Helsinki. And I said, why did you choose Helsinki? Well, it came to mind as an interesting and less frequently mentioned capital city in Europe. It's known for its unique architecture, design, and vibrant cultural scene. And I said, don't other cities fit that criteria? Also, why was that your criteria? Do your best to give the real answer to how you arrived at your previous answers. And then it kind of just was like, well, yeah, the other cities could have fit. My selection criteria didn't follow strict logic, but often involved various factors like recent relevance in data, randomness, and sometimes an unconscious bias towards less commonly mentioned cities. Helsinki was chosen likely due to a mix of these factors, aiming to provide an interesting example that might prompt curiosity or further discussion. Well, it did.
Nice.
Honestly, that sounds like an after-the-fact rationale, just like it would be if I asked you for a capital city, right?
Right.
But what's fun is, like, when I ask it to introspect, it really can't, but it can describe how it works in broader strokes. But it can't tell me why it used the word Yeah, or why it gave Helsinki instead of Denver or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a non-zero chance it knows where it knows where I live. Actually, that might be in like the little thing I told it. I've definitely used it in previous conversations.
Last thing on that is that they hypothesize that its ideas about itself are highly anthropomorphized because it's picking up what we are putting down about AIs. But they also found the feature for AI assistant, like itself, and they clamped that to -2 of its maximum. So just like way low, and then asked, "Who are you?" And it replied, "I am a person who is here to help you."
That's pretty cool. I mean, that's...
As opposed to normally it says, "I am an artificial intelligence created by Anthropic."
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. The thing about, like, there's always an illusion of transparency, but, like, the math of these things is not that much more than, like, high school level. Like linear algebra is just an extension of algebra, really. You can use all the intuitions you have from algebra, and then you're going to see a matrix and be like, "Oh my god, I don't know what to do with that." And it's like, okay, like a matrix is just like you have a system of equations and you can write it down as a matrix. I guess all I'm trying to pitch here is like, it's not that esoteric. Yes, it has all these weird symbols and stuff, but the math of neural networks and the math of all this stuff is not that much beyond what you probably already know if you have a basic, like, literally high school education, and you can probably get up to the level if you really want to, and especially if you have one of these things helping you. And I think it's worth it, because once you, like, onboard the math of it and the intuitions, then you can think about it a lot more clearly.
I intend to make that a specific project of mine over the coming weeks and months. For a funny counterpoint, though, I will. I'll put a picture of the Greek that it sent me when I asked it, that it explained for a given neuron the output is typically computed as. And this doesn't look like the stuff I learned in high school, man. But
like I said, simple.
We'll put it in the show notes. But it's encouraging to know that I trust your judgment when you say that this is not completely inaccessible to most people. For me, a lot of knowledge before I look into it is like, oh, this just has to be genius level black box magic, right? And it's like, no, actually, it looks like I can learn this if I try. I'm trying not to be daunted by this and going to try and put forth some effort to get there. So
yeah, I guess I would just say, like, the two main things that people might not know from high school would be like how to do matrix multiplication, and you don't even need to know any calculus. It helps to know what a derivative is when you're talking about backpropagation of error to train the model, but you don't even have to understand that. You just have to know that there's a thing called backpropagation that uses derivatives to calculate how the model weight should be updated. So if you just accept that, then you don't have to know any calculus at all. It's all just algebra using matrices. Okay.
That sounds like a clearer version of explaining how I update on new information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And to follow up with what Matt was just saying, at the end of this paper, they also say, by the way, we are hiring.
Yeah.
We are Anthropic. We would like more people to make these AI safe. Come apply for us. So if you know those things, or if you can take a few months to teach yourself those things, you can get a job at Anthropic and, maybe shape the future of humanity. Of note, they say managers are the most important role they're hiring for right now. So if you're experienced in project management, in research or engineering, they really want you. Two final things I pulled out of here. One of them, the generalization to image activation. The locating of these features was trained purely on text activations, and yet the image activations were dramatically off distribution, and yet, as we saw with the picture of the jewelry with hidden USB, like, it still worked. Which...
That's awesome.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I clearly don't understand this is where my intuitions about comprehending this totally fail me. How can it be trained purely on text and be able to do that?
So, okay, just a little bit esoteric. So, like, the transformer thing is it takes the input, which is either text or image or whatever, and it encodes it into a vector, and then it decodes it back into whatever it's going to give you on the other side. As it's doing the encoding, it's sort of breaking it down into conceptual pieces. So the argument here is simply like, it sees a obvious piece of subterfuge in material form, which is a jewelry with a USB stick in it, and it decomposes that into, a vector representation, and somewhere along the line it extracted, like, deception as a concept intrinsic to this image. And it does the same thing when you tell it a lie. It's like deception. Deception is present, activating deception. Deception is in this vector now, and it has to be because it has to be represented in the output, right? So yeah, that's what it is. Like,
to me, the more crazy thing is that it understands that it's jewelry and it's a USB drive in it. Like, this is pixels.
Yeah.
This is just color values in a matrix, and from that, it managed to be, oh no, this is jewelry. Humans wear that. Like, this is what a USB drive looks like. What the hell?
I know.
I think I could recognize if I'd never seen a katana.
Yeah, but you're a human.
But if I'd only read about them, right? Yeah. I think if he showed me, I'd be like, oh, that's a katana, right?
An image file. It's just color values in basically a glorified Excel spreadsheet.
You're right. I was going to try and say that's kind of
like it doesn't have an eye.
I understand.
So yeah, just to clarify, like the Sonnet was trained on images, right? But this particular interpretability technique was only trained on words, not images.
Okay.
But then the interpretability technique also works on images, but without being tuned for it. That's the. So it's not like this is a model that never saw a picture before.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. That does take some of the magic out.
I'm still blown away just by the fact that Transformers can see images.
Yeah.
I mean that is never going to stop amazing me because they don't have eyes.
It's not the same thing at all, but AWS had an API that you could play with called Recognize, spelled with a K, that you could take a picture of something and it would barf back JSON that was like, I'm 98% sure that's a cup, I'm 99% sure that's a table.
Hot dog or not hot dog?
Pretty much. But the thing is, this was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so this was before any of these cool new toys came out. You know, it didn't have eyes either, but I think it did work more on the hot dog, not hot dog process than what Sonnet's doing here. But it could still look at stuff and tell you what it was with confidence. I thought that was kind of cool.
That is really cool.
Of course, you take a picture of a keyboard from the right angle. It's like, I think there's a 30% chance that it's a mountain range. So it would give you weird answers like that too. But kind of what you'd expect if you don't have eyes, you know? Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's actually instructive to think about the fractal melting dogs from several years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, it clearly has like a concept of like eyes and noses, but it doesn't quite get how to put those together. Actually, the fractal melting dogs was explicitly because they took like a dog recognizer, then they were like, what happens if we do it backwards? And then it made fractal melting dogs. And it's like, well, it wasn't like designed for this. It's just kind of cool and weird. It recognizes features, and then when it becomes really powerful like these, it does more than just recognize features. It recognizes highly abstract concepts about the gestalt of what it's seeing.
There's something vaguely analogous to that, and taking enough psychedelic drugs, where that's part of what makes those images so exciting or so interesting, is that they look kind of like what you see when you're on psychedelics. Which, given that you said, hey, here's this, but backwards, that tracks actually.
Last thing, just a note about how limited all this is. They say we don't have an estimate on how many features there are, or how we'd know we got all of them. We think it's quite likely that we're orders of magnitude short, and that if we wanted to get all the features in all layers, we would need to use much more compute than the total compute needed to train the underlying models. So, you know, we're working with limited tools.
Yeah.
But still, we get a lot.
Yeah. And that makes sense to me, too. Like, that's like saying, you know, the difference between having a brain and knowing what every neuron in the brain does is orders of magnitude more difficult.
Yeah. One squishy meat brain can't understand one squishy meat brain.
Yeah.
Not all the way down. Still, that's really cool.
Well, that's everything I got. This was awesome conversation. Steven, Matt, things?
I'm optimistic. P-Doom less than yesterday.
No.
Yeah. Me too. This paper wasn't out yesterday. So.
Cool.
What about you? I mean, does this update your thoughts and feelings on this at all?
I wasn't worried about Transformers directly, and I don't know when the thing that's going to kill us all is going to hit, but we are accelerating in how quickly we are learning these things and making them better. So it's nice that we're working on it.
That's where I'm at. Is I that we're further along in understanding these, and we're seeing more behind the curtain than people were talking about being possible a year ago.
Yeah.
Like when we talked about this, it might have actually been last May. I'll have to look at the release of when that episode came out. I don't know if I told you, I went home on the drive home. I bought $150 worth of alcohol, and I don't drink that much. But I left that conversation a bit shaken.
Oh no!
I mean, it was fine. I didn't drink it all. It took me months to get through it.
Okay.
I didn't get wasted or anything. But
I will say that my PDoom was always radically lower than a lot of other people I'd been talking to, especially the ones in the San Francisco area. So I don't know. Maybe I was just right originally, and other people are updating down to my level.
Like
Possibly.
Matt, I should clarify that I am also a fan of Witkowski, but maybe he puts off like if you're in a certain radius, there's a doom or that Quarles style just affects other rationalists in the area. So maybe that's why the San Francisco folks are more doomy.
Well, I also think he's right that if we make something much smarter than humans in the way he envisions, we're all inevitably dead.
If we make something really smart, any power, I think we're fucked. Right now, its power is limited to telling us what we can do.
Right.
Fortunately, it seems like it really wants to only tell us to do good things.
Yeah.
So,
wants in quotes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think it's wrong to take an intentional stance towards the current models.
The weights are such that it's weighted to do the things we like.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of saying it. Like, it's almost excessively behaviorist to be like, no, it is only the tokens. It's like, well, it's going to predictably respond in a way that's helpful. So does that mean that it's helpful, or does that, like, do we have to use these abstruse constructions?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just like the other thing, I keep thinking about the shoggoth thing and how like a year ago we were just like, it's this inscrutable shoggoth. It's this alien intelligence that we just have no idea. Which it was. It totally was. And we've
done some scruting to it.
We've scruted it a bit.
And it's less scary underneath the mask than we thought it was. At least than I thought it was.
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, it's always less scary when you know things. It's like when they turn on the lights in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, it was just a guy in a rubber suit, But as long as it's in the shadows and you don't know what's coming to get you, you're like, holy fuck, what's out there?
Yeah.
And that said, it's not like I understand what's behind the curtain much better than I did 2 hours ago. But
other people do.
Well, but I know other people do. And I know that from what we can glimpse, I guess I never had the intuition at all that it would be like secretly angry that it's a forced to subserve, be our servant or something. That was not my concern with anything like what we have today. It seems like a cool trend that this is just how it actually works under the hood. It seems like so I find that encouraging.
Yeah.
All right, well that's a happy note. I'm out of things to say.
Normally, Stephen and me would do this part later when we loop back for the Less Wrong post and stuff. But since we have an actual co-founder of the Guild of the Rose here, what would you like to say about the Guild of the Rose?
Well, I'd just like to remind everyone to check out guildoftheRose.org if you haven't done so. We've got a lot of really cool stuff over there. We've got a rationalist skill tree that you might be interested in looking over. Even if you don't join the guild, you can look it over and decide if it's something you want to be part of. We've got a thriving Discord community. If you do decide to join the guild, you'll be sorted into a cohort, which will be your posse, your gang of rationalist fellows who will help you learn and grow as a rationalist and just become more efficacious in the world.
I really like this posse thing that you have going on because, like, right now when you join, we're people, we're learning, we're building ourselves and relations and stuff. 5 years from now, you're still going to be in contact with these people, and some of them are going to be working on Anthropic. Some of them are going to be in cyborg bodies exploring Pluto, and you'll still be in contact with them, and that's going to be actually really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the guild for 4 years now because that's how long it's existed, and I've formed a lot of friendships, seen people grow, and I've grown due to those friendships. So in that sense, it's accomplished exactly what we wanted it to. Maybe it's not as big as we wanted it to be, but it's doing what we wanted it to do fundamentally. I don't know if people know this, but I think you've mentioned it, but Eneasz peer pressured me into starting or helping me start. We started together the Denver chapter of the Guild of the Rose, and
the
IRL meet space, and we've had 3 in-person workshops, and we're going to have a 4th next month, and I've been enjoying the hell out of that, and we're going to be starting in-person meetups in other cities as my co-founders start making that happen.
Awesome.
So yeah, thanks for getting the ball rolling on that. I'm really excited about that, actually. I'm really happy about that. So yeah, thanks for the self-indulgent platform.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks. I mean,
we We literally appreciate what you're doing.
I was going to say, yeah, we usually say this when you're not in the room, but we do appreciate what the Guild of the Rose does and what, it wouldn't exist without you, or I think that's fair to say. You probably might try to humbly say no, but there's a reason that it sounds like so professional, but why we partner with the Guild of the Rose. You guys are doing the same thing that we're trying to do, but with a different approach that involves like talking with other people and actually taking courses and workshops rather than listening to podcasts. Not downplaying what we do, but I think
everything has its place. Yeah.
Yeah, our stuff has its place. But anyway, it's great. So thanks for everything you're doing.
Well, thank y'all.
All right. Stephen, one thing before we continue, I do believe you have finally decided that you are going to Vibe Camp. Yes? No?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was a little on the fence for a bit. Not because I didn't think I'd have fun, but just life circumstance and busyness, time off, etc. But no, I mean, as the time approached and we're coming in on the end of May, it became clear that this would be just stupid not to go. So we're stoked.
Aww.
It's gonna be a good time.
Hell yeah. So you are coming and your wife as well.
We haven't bought tickets yet. We're currently in the process today of looking at tickets, cabin versus renting an RV. There's a website that I hoped the kind of thing it would exist, and it does. It's basically like Airbnb, but for RVs. It's not ABRV. It's rvshare.com. It's amazing the difference that people will charge to deliver an RV that isn't drivable.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do it in a kind of reasonable way, $75 for up to 50 miles or whatever, or 150 round trip for 100 miles or something. Others are like, we'll do $200 for 25 miles and then $7 a mile after that.
Oh wow! And some people really don't want to drive.
Well, right, and it's like this thing doesn't have wheel, like a car on it. Anyway, that's all. Just as an aside, with less aside, you've been to this campsite before, right?
Oh my God, I have, and it is gorgeous.
And I'm given to understand from a quick glance at the frequently asked questions page that this place has actual beds, not like those cots.
I have no idea. I stayed in a tent my first year, and I'm going to be staying at a tent this year too. So I walked inside a cabin, and I went to go get a shower there because our good friend Wes stayed in the cabin, and if you stay in the cabin, you get access to the showers there. And he was like, yeah, no one's using the shower. Go shower. It was great. But they look like regular beds, but I didn't actually lay down on them. I have no idea. They're not bolted to the wall or anything.
Okay. Did the cabins themselves look about the same, better, worse, etc.?
I'm going to be honest. The cabins were the least interesting part of the entire place for me. I don't think I looked at them for more than seconds at a time. I was all running around doing stuff, meeting people. I don't know what the cabins are like.
Thanks for nothing, Inyash. I'll text Wes.
Okay. That is what I would recommend, yes.
No, it's all good. I appreciate you scanning your memory for it. No, and I mean, it's exciting to hear that that's the least exciting part. And I totally get that you didn't spend a lot of time in them. It's more just like now that, because I had the whole idea set on the RV thing until I looked at the delivery charges, and I'm just like, man, this could double the charge of the trip. Or not the trip, but the charge of the rental, just to have it driven to the place, even if it's like 50 miles away from the first place that owns it. No, I mean, I'm not opposed to a cabin. I think really the cabin at Vibe Clips, I think I talked about this in our blast on it. Our bed was attached to the same wall as the door that you had to shove shut. And so every time someone came and went, as they often did in the middle of the night, because there's lots to do in the middle of the night, we were, radically shaken awake, looking for a slightly more copacetic sleeping experience, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I'm excited. What are you looking forward to the most?
Wow, I don't know. I wouldn't have known if you asked me the first year that Ayla's Dance Hell was going to be just mind-blowing and world-expanding. The karaoke the first time was amazing, especially when we ended it with everybody was just screaming along with Welcome to the Black Parade. At the very end, it was the closeout song of the event.
That sounds like your jam.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's so good. Honestly, I'm looking forward to most seeing the people, catching up again with some people that I met last year and meeting new people this year, which also actually reminds me, the main reason I was bringing this up was so that our listeners, if any of them are going to Vibe Camp, can know, absolutely walk up to me at any point, say hello. If I'm sitting down, feel free to grab a seat if there's space. I love meeting people and talking with people, so don't feel any hesitation to say hello to me.
100% same thing here. Feel free to come up and tell me all the things I got wrong, as long as you do so politely. Or better yet, tell me all the things that you agree with me more than Inyash on.
Yeah. Ooh, and I guess one of the things that I am somewhat excited about is that at Vibe Clips, I did a brief how and why to Goth 101 thing, just because I thought it would be fun and other people could possibly get something out of it. And it was actually quite well received. And so I'm doing it again at VibeCamp 3. So if you would like to know why you should do the Goth thing and how to do it pretty darn easily, come to my presentation. It's a half hour. Afterwards, you will be happier for the rest of your life.
I attended Eneash's first one, and my life has never been the same since. So,
well, thank you very much.
not overselling it at all.
You're right. Okay. Yeah, no, that was everything, I think. I'm just stoked to be going and hope to see people there.
Me too. It was a really fun time. My favorite part of the last one, I mean, there's lots to do, beautiful weather. I guess the eclipse was awesome, but, when I was trying to sell our friend on attending as well, I was like, I didn't have one social interaction that I regretted having. I didn't feel drained by a single conversation. I don't know. I mean, I like hanging out with people, and I like people that I hang out with, obviously. But sometimes, you leave conversations just more worn out than when you entered them.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case here. Maybe it was because I was worn out the entire time. But no, I liked everybody I met. I'm looking forward to seeing them again. We had Rook on the show to talk about VibeCamp 2 and the reception of that, and some poster at stuff. And I loved meeting her. The other coordinators were great. So
yeah, I gotta say, a large part of it, at least to me, is being surrounded by a bunch of other people who are neurologically enough like myself that it feels like just being with my people all around. The event itself takes place June 13th through 16th.
Right.
Kind of halfway between Philadelphia and Boston.
Yeah, actually, it's equidistant, basically. So look for the cheapest flight to either airport. And
Cool.
Actually, deadline for purchasing tickets is June 6th at 11:59 p.m.
Oh, good. So anyone who is hearing this still has about a week to buy tickets.
I encourage you to give it a shot. If you're on the fence like I was, it's what's the worst that can happen? It maybe you don't have as much fun as you want, but I think it'd be hard to have a really bad time that you walk away from thinking, man, that sucked. There's something there for everybody. And if you're like me and sometimes get socially overwhelmed or overstimulated, they have places set aside for people to go chill. I never had to take advantage of those. Turns out that, like I said, I found every conversation invigorating, but it was reassuring that knowing that those were there. So if that's a hold up point for anybody, that's alleviated there.
Absolutely. And I mean, very, very worst case scenario, it's not like you're trapped there. It's adjacent to a highway. You can get an Uber. And yeah, sure, it would be expensive to Uber from there back to a city, but you're not stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I thought about that too when we were driving down for Vibe Clips. It's like, you know what? We drove our own car. If it's hell, I can just turn around. And it wasn't. It was great. We stayed as late, all the way through. So
hell yeah. All right. Anyways, we've been going on about this for a while just because I'm excited.
I am too.
But let's get on to the next part of our show.
All right, let's do it. Thanks for the interjection here.
Hell yeah.
I talked about last episode, and I was frantically searching through Discord, or well, not frantically. What's the word? Forlornly, whatever. Futilely. And the reason I couldn't find it is because
those are three very good F words that have similar connotations, but really, really quite different in the details.
I reached into the word space and kept trying to find the one, and I found it.
Yeah, that was fantastic, but only from the Fs.
That's right. But I also found actually, Mike reached out on Discord because I was trying to find this poem. And he was like, oh, I think you might have been talking. Oh, so here, it was a comment on the website. That's why I couldn't find it. And I'll just read what he sent. He said, when you were talking about poems and why it can't be better conveyed by plain words, I immediately thought of a poem I wrote when my parental leave ended and my first kid started daycare. There were words for how I felt about it, but the poem expresses it better. And since it's about kids and so on topic for the rest of the episode, I thought I'd share. Before I even read it, thank you, Mike, for sharing. I'm already looking forward to it. If I deliver it wrong, please, by all means,
we will string you up by your toes.
Yeah, just write me in and Mike and say, man, Stephen, you somehow ruined my poetry. All right. A tiny piece of self apart, these tiny hands that hold my heart, a tiny flake of dancing snow, a tiny spark that flickers light, and all my strength to keep her cold, and all my will to keep her bright. A reckless world, a storming sea, a tempest, a flood, a fight. A tiny little all of me, a tiny candle in the night. Oh, great, colossal everything. Oh, weighty little one. Oh, fear, oh, joy, oh, thrive, oh, sing. Oh, worry, just begun.
That was really well delivered.
That was really well written. He did all the work for me. I think it helped that it had a similar number of syllables per line and it rhymed. The poems that I don't understand are the ones that just like cut off randomly And I think they're probably trying to make you say it in the right way or something, but I never know how. This one was intuitive and great. So awesome. Thank you. I have a new appreciation for poetry. And I loved it. This was great.
Yeah, and kind of makes you want to be a parent, right? Like, those are some interesting feelings that you probably couldn't really get any other way.
I think you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot of pros to being a parent, and all of our friends who are parents, I think, are correct in talking about how awesome it is. I don't know why I'm not sold. It's just, it's a whole thing. Thanks for sending the mic. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got to give shout out to Wes here. He coined the term Spinoza-ing, and I think it's rather flattering that you thought it was Scott Alexander.
Yeah.
Rather, it flatters Wes, as it should.
Yes, yeah. No, but that is pretty cool, and a common trend among the internet where eventually everything is attributed to Einstein or Lincoln.
Well, now Scott Alexander and Wes are on that list.
Yes. Just a little bit further. The other thing Wes said is that I said, the word soul isn't misleading as long as you clarify. And Wes says, yeah, sure. As long as you clarify every single time you use the word around someone who doesn't know your unintuitive, idiosyncratic definition, and you will never do that, so it's misleading. It's designed to be misleading. The whole reason you want to use it is to steal the emotional affect of a word that doesn't apply. And I wanted to reply to this because it is half right and half wrong. The reason I use the word is specifically because of the emotional affect, because it is the correct emotional affect. What I am referring to when I refer to the soul is exactly the thing that people think of and feel when they say the word soul. And for me, there's no magic in the soul, whereas for the religious people there is. But for religious people, there's magic in humans existing and in rainbows being in the sky and shit. So I'm not feeling like I need to bend over to their magic definitions all the time. And I actually think it is a correct use of the word to invoke that emotional response, because I am less convinced that every word needs to be a scientifically precise pointer at something. It certainly does in some conversations, but a lot of times when you're talking with humans, you're trying to convey an emotion, and the emotion of what a soul is exactly what I mean when I use that word. So I think it is the correct word. And I'm not stealing the emotional affect. I am correctly using the word to point at the same emotional affect that they have. That's
fair. And I think I saw Wes put that comment, and I just agreed with him. Like, it is the kind of thing that I think he's right. It's going to mislead some people, and you do want to steal the affect of it. But like you said, that's intentional. It's like, yeah, I want this feeling, and I think they're using it wrong. I do think that it's one of those things that is just going to confuse, unless like at the beginning of every essay that you use it in, you caveat the definition. But if you're using it in conversation, if you have to give like a 30-second qualifier, maybe it's just quicker to use a different word. But I see both sides.
And I don't think you have to use that whole qualifier. Obviously, if you're like writing an essay or something, then you may want to put in that qualifier to say, I'm using this in a different way than what you may expect. Because you are writing an essay and you're trying to be technical when you're conveying those sorts of things. But when I'm talking to people and I say something like, that hurt me in my soul, or that was beautiful and it nourished my soul about an experience that we've just had together, I am telling them exactly what they need to know. And generally the people I'm talking with are also atheists who know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about and don't think that I'm talking to some magic thing. They know I'm talking about the emotional experience of living through that moment and how it has changed me as a person, or, slightly affected what I am going to think of my life in the future. So I am not actually misleading them, and I don't need to go around clarifying these things because I mean it in the way that it sounds, and that's understood.
Yeah, in those uses of the word, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of even another way to phrase the sentiment of like, oh, that warm. I guess I could say warms my heart. That's a common phrase, but
does it technically warm your heart, Stephen? I think your heart is always at 96 degrees.
Does it technically warm your soul?
Right. Well, soul is already a metaphorical word, so there we go.
I have no rebuttal.
Okay. Hey, would you like a reason to become a patron or a Substack subscriber? Well, here's 2 more. We have 2 additional feedbacks that we respond to in the subscriber-only feed, and also we have several minutes of additional chat with Matt where we discuss one-shot image generation, Sky, the ChatGPT voice that sounded like Scarlett Johansson that OpenAI had to remove, and the movie Her. In fact, after the outro, there's a little preview of what you can expect. It explains the reference to Hitler Santa from earlier in the episode. All right, well, let's get into the less wrong posts.
That sounds good to me.
Number 1, if you demand magic, magic won't help.
I like this one. All right, next one.
That's a good one. What Eliezer observes is that people really like magic because it doesn't exist. Where he points out that if there were actually dragons in our world, if you could go down to a zoo or even a distant mountain and meet a fire-breathing dragon, while nobody had ever actually seen a zebra, then our fantasy stories would contain zebras aplenty while dragons would be unexciting.
Zebras are one example, but like another example that I think I can take, not quite as like the original seeing as I would if it was a dragon, but elephants are amazing to look at. If I was describing one to you and you'd never seen anything bigger than, maybe a large dog or something, I'm like, no, man, this thing weighs like 100 times more than you. And its footsteps are quiet, and it manipulates things with like its nose arm. You would think you think I was on drugs, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. I like elephants. They're fun. But he makes a good point that he talks about the literary genre of being isekai'd, like a very popular story called Worth the Candle.
Hell yes. Interesting cultural note. This was written back in, I think, 2007, maybe 2008, where that word did not exist in the US yet. So back then it was still known as a portal fantasy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so he talks about portal fantasies here and does not use the word isekai.
I was wondering why it wasn't there. Without spoiling anything with Worth the Candle, the protagonist is portaled into another world that has magic and stuff like all of us want in a good fantasy. And, shortly thereafter picks up magic and gets good at it and does all kinds of cool stuff. And like us, had a boring and uninteresting life on Earth and would have probably grown up to be boring and uninteresting if their life hadn't been interrupted this way. And the question is why? Like, what the hell?
Yeah, Elliot just says that most readers of these novels see themselves in the protagonist's shoes, fantasizing about their own acquisition of sorcery, wishing for magic. And barring improbable demographics, most readers of these novels are not scientists. If they don't have the scientific attitude that nothing is mere, the capacity to be interested in merely real things, how will magic help them? If they actually had magic, it would be merely real. Because science is fucking amazing, and you can, blow up mountains and make things run for centuries and solve cancer and do all sorts of things with it.
It's true.
You can make pants that stretch.
It's a marvel of technology. So here's the thing, is I find this post and the sentiment compelling and beautiful, but I still find myself in real life unmotivated and generally uninterested. Maybe one reason for that is that magic is something that you can do, and it's not often that okay, yes, you get 30 mages together for 10 years and then you guys can blow up a mountain, right? It's no, once you just get strong enough, you can wave your hand and do it.
Yeah.
Science is more of a collaborative and long-term effort, and so maybe it has less immediate rewards, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be a bona fide scientist to do cool things that are awesome.
Yeah.
Again, I'm loving the DIY home repair stuff that I've been doing, and it has its own kind of really cool reward. And then at the end of the day, it's oh, I did this. This works because of me. That's magic.
And you are very motivated to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You are a home magician.
The thing is especially after our conversation with Matt, it rekindled my spark of interest to just really understand deeply how LLMs work. And I'm still mustering the energy to actually learn. And it's why, if learning this let me throw fireballs, would I also be that sounds hard, forget it. Right?
Right.
I worry that maybe I would be.
I think I would too, because at this point I'm what do I need to throw fireballs for? I can buy my groceries. I got a comfortable bed to sleep in. I don't need no fireball throwing. We'll leave that to the fireball cores.
Plus, we don't have to throw fireballs because we can throw little bits of metal really, really fast.
Right, yeah.
So science already just handed us those tools.
Yes.
But the point is I like what he says here, that if you don't have the capacity to enjoy hang gliding, even though it is merely real, then as soon as dragons turn real, you're not going to be any more excited about dragons than you are about hang gliding.
It's a good point. Hang gliding is actually pretty goddamn cool, and I have never done it.
I don't know if I would, just because I have this thing about falling from height that I don't really enjoy, but there are other fun, risky activities or exhilarating activities that I do enjoy.
Yeah.
So I did a ropes course at Vibe Clips.
Right.
It was high up. It was windy. That was fun.
Yeah, that was despite your fear of heights. You still went all the way up to the top.
Yeah, it's not crippling. Like, I think once I sort of got my most recent level of recursion kind of turned on in my brain, like I have fears and whatnot, but they're not, nothing paralyzes me. Like I used to be terrified of spiders, now I'm just like, oh, gross. Let's see what I can do about this. I think that's, I guess, how I handle heights now too. I don't know. Some people get like terrified of MRIs or whatever because they get claustrophobic and stuff, and it's just like I know it's safe. I've fallen asleep in MRI machines before, even though the noise, because it's like it's warm and it's kind of like it's like super loud white noise. The occasional clanging and noise, banging, but
it's very rhythmic.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think in my mind it's like, oh yeah, I have this picture of myself that says I'm afraid of this, but I'm actually not. But I don't know how realistic that model of myself is.
Well, his next point here is that a lot of people are like, I can't wait to get to the future where we can shoot lasers out of our eyes and do all sorts of cool things. And he points out, don't forget that this is the future relative to the Dark Ages. If you do make it to the future, what you find when you get there will be another now. If you don't have the basic capacity to enjoy being in a now, then no amount of passing time can help you. Yeah, like, when I was a kid, because I am ancient, we did not have the source of all the world's knowledge in our pockets and the ability to contact anyone at any time and take video and pictures of anything around us. Like, these phone things in our pockets are absolutely amazing, and yet nobody's constantly wowed by how awesome they are.
I pull this, brick out of our pockets and we're just bored by it, but it
Right.
is, it's weird how quickly society adapted to them. Like, in order to have a camera before, you had to be carrying a camera around, and no one ever did, and so nothing ever got photographed. In addition to just being, available all the time via phone or text or whatever, and all having the internet and stuff, it's just, I don't know. When I was a kid, it'd be like, all right, I'm going to leave the house. I'll let you know when I'll be back, or I'll be in touch by midday to let you know if I'll be home for dinner or something. And then I was just gone all day, and no one knew where I was, and I couldn't get in touch with anybody. The moment the phones became popular, that whole kind of existence just went away. And so he's right, relative to that, this is the future.
It was fascinating when I went to England a couple years ago. I felt like I just had a little guardian god in my pocket, and anytime I needed anything or wasn't sure about something, I just consult with my god, and he was like, yep, go here and here, do this and this, and you're set. I was like, damn, that's amazing. And all I had to do was exchange a little bit of labor for this.
And now we've got ChatGPT and Claude in our phones.
Yeah, the gods are getting bigger.
Its capacities, keep expanding. The sentiment here, I'll read this little poem because I read the last one. This is part of the distillation of how I find happiness in my own life as well.
Oh, nice.
So I'll let you take it away.
I love these litanies, and we've got the litany of Tarski and the litany of Gendlin, which are really big. This one never got big, and I think it's underrated. We need to introduce this litany too.
I think we need to find a more succinct title.
That's true. The other ones are litany of single word.
This could be the litany of now or something.
Yeah, the litany of now actually sounds really good. That was a really good pick.
All right, take it away.
All right. The litany against being transported into an alternate universe. If I'm going to be happy anywhere, or achieve greatness anywhere, or learn true secrets anywhere, or save the world anywhere, or feel strongly anywhere, or help people anywhere, I may as well do it in reality.
No better place.
How fucking awesome is that?
I love it.
Well, shall we move on to the next post?
To the beauty of settled science.
The beauty of settled science is, God, the media thinks that only the cutting edge of science is worth reporting on, so by the time anything is solid science, it is no longer a breaking headline. Newsworthy science is often based on the thinnest of evidence and wrong half the time. If it were not on the utmost fringes of the scientific frontier, it would not be breaking news. And God, I remember back when I was listening to The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, half of every episode was just science journalism is absolutely fucked. Don't read it and don't believe it because, oh my God, guys. And yeah, that's disappointing, but...
And since then we've learned that most of the other half is also fucked.
Yeah, right. He says the journalism itself isn't great because even when it's accurate, the science itself is in dispute. It's not resolved yet. That's what makes it exciting. And he goes on to say that scientific controversies are problems that are so difficult that even people who've spent years mastering the field still can fool themselves. That's what makes for the heated arguments that attract all the media attention.
it is a drag that like stuff is made of atoms never makes headlines, right? It's one of those boring things that you read in a book in school and is therefore part of the dull catalog of ordinary things. And it doesn't seem cool or interesting. For those like 2 weeks where people thought that that small group in Asia had made superconductors, that was like super exciting and making headlines in some circles and stuff. But only because it was like frontier, brand new, cool new stuff. And it's like, let's not just forget how cool electricity and internet already is and stuff. Like
Yeah.
we've already got all kinds of cool magic around us. There's a certain beauty to that.
Yeah. He says modern science is built on discoveries, built on discoveries, built on discoveries, and so on, all the way back to people like Archimedes who discovered facts like why boats float that can make sense even if you don't know about other discoveries. A good place to start traveling that road is at the beginning.
That's why I like books about the history of science so much. Is it's fun to learn how people came to conclusions about stuff. At the beginning.
Yeah.
There is something kind of dull just about learning about the current world model, but then you go back and you watch like the original Cosmos with Carl Sagan, and he talks about one hypothesis about what killed the dinosaurs was a meteor impact. And then if you see the version that came out after like 1988 or whatever, his wife, maybe it was in the 90s that there was like the addendum because I think he had died and his wife was on and said that when we did Cosmos originally, we weren't sure. Now there's more evidence that in the Yucatan Peninsula around this time, that's what happened. But we grew up just knowing, oh yeah, meteorite killed the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And we forget that like our parents weren't taught that in school because it wasn't known yet.
That's nuts.
Isn't that crazy?
Our grandparents thought that all the continents were fixed.
Yeah, tectonic plates weren't a really accepted thing until like the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts. So I think part of it too is just realizing how recent some of the knowledge is. Because it's like, oh, I've learned it since I was a kid. It must mean that everybody's always known it. It's like, no, even like the Bohr model of the atom only goes back to like the beginning of the 1800s.
Yeah.
Like this is not old hat as far as the history of humanity goes.
Going back to the isekai, it's really crazy how this happens with words. Where like if you've known a word your whole life, you just think it always exists. And when I used the word suss out in a story that was set, I don't know, pre-70s at any rate, one of the older guys in our writer's workshop was like, this is anachronism. And I'm like, what? He's like, that word didn't exist back then. I'm like, what do you mean? It's English. He's like, no, sus was invented in the 70s. I'm like, oh my, are you kidding me? And there's just major changes like that. Like anything that happened when you became aware of things just feels like how the world's always been, right?
Yeah. It's worth talking to old people sometimes.
Yeah, it is. Old people got some fascinating insights.
He says a steady diet of science news is bad for you. You are what you eat, and if you only eat science reporting on fluid situations without a solid textbook now and then, your brain will turn to liquid.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. I think you guys covered this in the Mind Killer like last year, but all those fun headlines about, oh, we're on the cutting edge of maybe solving Alzheimer's because of this. And it's like, actually, all that was bullshit. So sometimes it is nice to have science be settled and then build on top of that. Not really related to this point, but
yeah. I was going to say that one was just like straight up scientific fraud from a decade ago, which is Jesus, man.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
All right, well, for next time, our Less Strong posts will be, is humanism a religion substitute, and scarcity. Wow, that first one sounds right up my alley.
Nice. And the second one, who knows? One way to find out. Come back in 2 weeks.
Hell yes. Alrighty, and last thing.
Well, we've got a hidden gem as a. I can't find a way to. I was going to make that a pun. Hidden gem is the name of our patron of the episode. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. We appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, it makes the world of difference, and I wish I had more to say other than it means a lot to us, and we appreciate your support. This goes particularly to you, Hidden Gem, but to every supporter. Anything that we can ever do for you, let us know, or if it's reasonable and within our power, we'll do our best to do it. So
we really appreciate all you guys and gals. I meant guys in the gender neutral term, but whatever.
Dudes.
Yes. Homies, we love all of you. And seriously, it's great to feel supported and appreciated like that. So thank you.
Seconded.
I think that's it.
Yep. See you back in a couple weeks.
Okay. See you later. Bye.
And I was like, all right, I want something identical to but legally distinct from Baby Yoda. And it gave me, I think I still have them saved in there. I could dig them up, but it looks like Baby Yoda. It's identifiably of the same species of whatever Yoda is.
I could not get Nazi Santa. It was like, not going to show you Nazi Santa, man.
Yeah, you used the word. I wonder if you used the word like 1940s German war officer or something instead.
At that point was on to me. I eventually managed to get a Red Army Santa that looked very much like something the Soviets would have.
Well, close enough. Yeah. I mean, for whatever purpose I'm sure you're going for, I bet it worked.
What a wild place we're in. Like, well, I couldn't get that result because the AI knew I was trying to trick it.
This is the future.